Kia ora koutou, welcome to South Pacific Muscle. I'm flying solo tonight with our regular contributor, Mike Kingsnorth. Nate's busy and off doing other things. Darren was supposed to, there's Mike in the background, Mike with Mike in front of him. Darren Dingle was supposed to join us today, but I mucked up the time and a bit of a rookie mistake, but then he ended up doing some other bits and pieces. So he'll endeavour to join us at some point if he can. Tonight's episode is about posing and the value of posing, how important it is to get your posing right, how to get your posing right, hopefully some good examples. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, Mike Kingsnorth obviously puts a lot of time into his posing. He's well known as being a top quality poser, both in and out of the gym, both in and out of bodybuilding. Posing's been part of his life. So we're going to throw a few clips at you. We're going to show you sort of some examples of Mike's posing, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to actually, with Darren not here, we're going to kind of rip apart some of his posing and show you the kind of value Mike can add as far as the sort of the posing guru goes. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your sort of evolution or involvement in posing, why you took your posing so seriously, who your inspiration was from posing, and sort of how that came about early on, Mike?
Yeah, it's really interesting. White men can't dance apparently, and I was one of them. So I remember back. I mean, I don't want to take it too far back, but the first time I ever did posing, I got invited to do some posing at a Christmas show, and I put together a routine to We Are the Champions. And I had a friend come around, a friend of the family, who was previously 2 years prior a national champion in bodybuilding. And I said, "Oh, can you have a look and tell me what you think?" And I put it on. And he was like, "Wow, you're really good at this." And so I guess I always had a grasp of the interpretation of the music and to flow with that a little bit. And so I guess, that part is, I guess, just somewhat of a genetic gift or whatnot it might be. But the attention to the detail I put in is what's really made a big difference for me. I've from day one always worked on posing, always analyzed the living shit out of my posing, so much so that in the last show I literally blocked up the memory on my own phone just with videos and pictures, just assessing it day after day. And I've always been a big believer in putting on a great performance both in the compulsories but also in the routines. Back then the routines were actually judged, and you had a minute for the day show, and then you did your routine at nighttime and you had a minute and a half. And to me, it was like, well, I'm going to make sure that minute and a half I do as best as possible, because there's a chance I could go from 9th to 8th or something. I wasn't a terribly great bodybuilder in the early stages. And, and I always did pretty well. And then I went over to the Australian Pro 2004 with Matt Clark, and we watched the show, and he had Dexter Jackson and Chris Cormier and so forth from there. But the one I really remembered was King Kamali, and just the level of entertainment and detail and effort he put into his routine. And I couldn't tell you what Dexter posed to. I don't even remember it, but I remember Kamali's routine because it entertained us, and it really made me go. It switched me on, and I just took it the next year to a whole nother level with my music editing, my routine, my entertainment. And it's ironic that it took that to do it, because, as many of you know, for many years prior to that, I was a stripper for years. And, the women who we danced for require quality of entertainment. They're not as boring as guys who just want to get leery. The women need to be entertained. So we put on great quality performances because it was competitive as hell. If you didn't make money. And we were making great money. If you're going to make $100 in 7.5 minutes, you want to do it as much as you possibly can. And so I took that aspect of it and what it took to entertain, and I put that into the routines, and it just skyrocketed from there. And I've always had just dreams of the kind of routines I wanted to put together, I guess, whether it be the musically, the choreography, the poses I want to include. And being a bodybuilder, of course, I'm always flexing and posing, and you can't help but walk past a window without looking at your reflection and hitting your side chest or something. So, but the biggest thing for me is just the sheer level of analytics I put into it, and I've learned so much.
A little bit of professionalism too. I mean,
yeah,
you spend all this time on your diet and your training and all this. If you can't present yourself, it may not make a difference, but it can make a difference. You know,
well, you go to a car show, the guy with the red hot Ferrari doesn't turn up with it covered in dust. You know, they clean the living crap out of it. They make everything look as good as possible. And I don't understand why you would kill yourself training for 12 to 18 months, diet for 12 to 18 weeks, and then just have a hack at your posing. It's just like how you can't go out there and have that, because I've said in one of our earlier podcasts, posing isn't genetic. You know, my ability to understand the rhythm of the music might have been, but it's the effort you put in. There's plenty of people who didn't have a rhythmic bone in their body, but could put on great posing. Because of the effort, and that's all it is. There's no reason in my book to turn up to a show with bad posing, bad hair, or a bad tan. So, if you do any of that, it's on you.
Well, we grew up in the old Dorian Yates years, and he was sort of, there's nothing you could do more. There's no stone unturned. There's no little, 1%er that you're not taking care of. And, posing's a 1%er. It's probably more than that. But then why would you neglect that? Just a little bit extra.
It's everything. It's ridiculous to not, because how many times have we seen, Mike, where you've seen guys and they go, I'm not going to compete until I'm big enough, and they wouldn't compete. And I would always tell people, even when you're not big enough, compete, get on stage, get used to being on stage in your underwear in front of a packed audience, get used to the heat, the lights, what's going on up there, so that you're comfortable with it. Because by the time your body's good enough, you want to have pristine presentation. And, these guys turn up, and I've seen them with these amazing bodies, and they're like, oh, and their faces, they're just like a deer in the headlights, because they lack that experience, and they get beaten by a person with not as good a physique who's put that effort into presentation.
And the shaking and the puffing and the inability to hold their midsection tight, all that stuff.
It's just, it's laughable. I literally have been known to laugh at it sometimes, because it's just like, it's not, Phil Heath was going to be Phil Heath no matter what, but there's no reason to not be a good poser. You just put in that effort. Yeah.
So back in the day, I considered myself a reasonable poser. In my later years, I'm sort of lacking mobility and got a few injuries and things that sort of prevent me from doing what I really want. But I had a process when it came to my routines. I used to get together a bunch of poses that I thought I might look good in. I'd storyboard them. I'd learn them in blocks. I got a dance instructor to kind of help me with the transitions between the poses. It was all very well to hit the pose to maximize the way you look, but then you've got to move between them. I'd learn the posing routine to music in blocks, because you tend to get nervous and you rush through. So you kind of find yourself ahead of the music. And if you follow that through for a minute and a half, you end up 30 seconds ahead. So I'd realize after 4 poses, I'm a bit ahead. I'll hold that pose for a little bit longer, get back on cue. So there's a lot of, I'm not a natural poser. I'm not a natural bodybuilder in any sense. So everything was about process. So I had a process around learning and choreographing and putting together my routines as well. So I'm sure you've got a few processes and tricks and tips that you could share with us.
Yeah, very similar. I used to sit at work as a telemarketer, and while I was bored out of my nut, I would draw little pictures of poses and posing routines and whatnot, but very, very similar. The music, there's words and cues in the music, and I must hit this pose by this point and this pose by this point. And one of the great things you talked about there was slowing it down. And it's like, it shouldn't be the same speed. And that's what we do, from an entertainment background. You've got to take the audience through a journey. So you've got to make it exciting, and then you've got to make it a little bit more calm, and slow down and draw them in, and then wow them. If it's just, with all respect to a past Mr. Olympia, if you just go out there for 3 minutes of slow music, you're going to put everyone to sleep. It doesn't matter how good you are. And equally, the other ones that are just as bad as me, but it doesn't happen so much now, but back in the day, there'd always be some guy would turn up with a shaved head posing to Ramstein, just hitting most musculars, and he just thought, I'm hardcore, that's all I'm going to show. And you're like, great, you're actually shit, because you didn't do anything to excite us, or to you slow down and then bring into a specific pose. People are like, wow, that looks amazing, because you slowed down, you went into it, and pow, you hit it. And there's some great examples of that. Like, look at the video of my my back shot in Vancouver, where before hitting the rear double biceps, I did a whole play with my hands and my fingers, and it's like, people had never seen that. It was just unusual sort of stuff, like almost a butterfly type movement. But when the time come, and I learned this, I remember back in '94 I was supposed to do a U2 song, and I stole that concept. It wasn't the same song, but off Barry DeMay, who was an amazing poser. Anybody out there, 1988 Mr. Olympia, Barry DeMay, watch that routine like you can't believe it. So,
and to be honest, he was the one I always wanted to look like because he's about my height, about my weight, just a lot better bodybuilder than me.
Yeah.
Not a lot of my posing early on.
Did you get the rose tattoo?
No.
No.
Look, there's nothing worse than seeing someone get up there and just hit compulsories.
Oh,
kind of go, look, we've seen it. We've seen your compulsories. Show us something else.
Yeah, remember when we talked about the 2020 Nationals, and I talked about Mike Fowles, who got second in the overall, and second in the classic pose down. And I talked about how he was just hitting compulsory after compulsory after compulsory, and he got beaten by the guy that was hitting a variety of classic poses. Well, and that rule applies for both bodybuilding and classic as well. And then come the pro qualifier, I watched it, and Mike was hitting a variety of poses, and you could hear his coach Philly Nuku saying, more classic, change it up. Yeah. And it was like, and I talked to Phil afterwards, they'd listened to what I'd said, and it just looked 1,000 times better. It was more classic, more entertaining.
Well, especially in classic, where you've only got 5 compulsory poses, then it's your favorite classic pose, and you should have at least 2 or 3 of those.
And one of the things that in my first show, which this guy, Melvin, told me was, hit a pose, and then the judges are scanning across. They'll see you, and when they come back, look at you a second time, have a different version of that same pose. So just change it up a little bit, keep it exciting.
And you did that as a pro too. I noticed, the one that was on this year, like I was pretty impressed. They had you through 5 rounds of posing, and you were, rock solid the whole time, changing it up.
They tried to kill me. They tried, but they failed. One of the other competitors collapsed side stage, and I held it because we talked about Dorian, and Dorian's mantra was in my head that whole time of, when I stand there out the very back on the side, holding that relaxed pose. And the mantra was, I could do this all fucking day. Yeah. And they could have made us go for 3 hours, and I'd have held it.
And the thing is, no matter how bad you want to, if you haven't done the work, you can't just, like, all the will in the world can't make you hold those poses for 3, 4, 5 minutes if you haven't done the work. Yeah,
you've got to do the work. And some of my posing practice was almost crazy, but you've got to build that posing endurance, just like a surfer has to build paddling endurance, and a rugby prop who must be very strong still has to develop cardiovascular endurance to be able to run. So, this is, I can go through these routines just, and there's the slight variation on the double biceps, So it's just constant,
So evolution. You're talking about the Vancouver Pro. This is from 2008. Obviously,
no, this is 2019 Chicago. This is the morning of the Chicago show. So, and look at the face, just how gaunt it is. But it was just, posing, because it actually serves a purpose in the carb load. It helps draw, glycogen into the muscle. If you get a bit of a sweat on, you're getting rid of some water too. And it's just about being constantly switched on. The message in my head for Chicago was a message my wife sent me, and it was be switched on the entire time. And, not many people know it, but my wife is a platinum selling 4 times #1 single artist. So she knows about being on stage, and I just get that on my head. So the entire time, whereas, back in the open bodybuilding days, you go over to the side and stand there, relax, hands on hips, and just a bit lazy. And I'm like, nah, I went over there and I held it hard the entire time. And I know one of our New Zealand judges who's marked a fellow New Zealand pro down for being relaxed on stage, too relaxed, And so I was like, no, I'm going to stay switched on the whole time.
I've always told people, when you are at the back and the lighting's not so good and the judges aren't necessarily looking at you all the time, hold the shape. You don't have to squeeze everything super hard. So you can actually give yourself a little bit of a rest, but hold the shape. Bring the lats out, bring the shoulders up, keep the stomach in. I've seen Denver Chandy sort of at the background, puffing and panting and his guts hanging out and just not really having the stamina. It was a while back. He's obviously improved since then. But
one of the things you do, I'll give you a little trick, is if I'm standing there backstage and I suddenly just, and I change angle or foot position, or I lift my arm up and I look like I might be flexing an oblique, or just wiping the inner thigh or something, I'm actually using that. I'm changing it from my back to maybe my legs or my chest or something, just giving a moment for that muscle to switch off, get a bit of oxygen back into it, and then switch back on again. It looks like I'm showing you my calf, showing you my tricep, whatever else. I'm not really. I'm actually just giving myself a moment's rest.
Mm.
God, I was shattered that day. I sat down on that seat and I just fell asleep after this. It was crazy. But just, my posing practice here, like these, go for, well, it's a 4-minute routine. The number of times at home for comp prep, I would do the routine 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, do it 4, 5, 6 times in a row, and videoing it and then watching back and then videoing or watching.
I remember
back, video and watching back. And then we talked about that endurance. And so
I remember back in the day prepping and putting on a video, because that's how long ago it was, putting on a video of someone calling through the compulsories. And as they called through their compulsories, I would hit mine as well, get right through, give myself 10 seconds to rewind the video again, go through it again, and you'd hold it with the athletes on the video just to kind of get used to the timing and holding that.
Clip out.
Oh, look, it's all part of the lack of professionalism that people have come to know and love.
So this is actually a week later, and this is Vancouver. This is upstairs at West Coast Iron. Still got my beloved trusty BSC beanie on. I use that. That actually has a purpose. Keep me hot, get me sweating. I was a lot better this week because I had a week off the travel. It took me 28 hours to get to Chicago, so that really wrecked it. But this video I posted, it was right before the weigh-in, and then I shared it with Muscular Development. I sent it to them, and they posted it on their Facebook and their Instagram and so forth. And man, that blew my mind that I don't have that happening. So, but again, it's just reminding myself every little key. Like, we look at posing, and you look at something like that, I think it's so simple. We're working. It's like driving a manual car while doing maths at the same time. Oh, here we go. Here's the entertainment side of the business.
Have you switched over? Can you see can you see my new one? I thought I'd
I can see you've got the 3 seconds of the Melbourne one. Can people hear it?
But a Star Wars and behind it.
Yeah. I had always wanted to pose to Star Wars. This one, the music for this whole routine, I paid $450 to have it edited back in the day. And we were copying it off DVDs, getting the voiceovers. I really wanted to make it a really strong New Zealand presence. So there was a lot of New Zealand music on. Before I walked on stage, I actually came out to the opening of Slice of Heaven. So it was and then it went into the haka, and a lot of Star Wars voiceovers and whatnot. And you can see this is the showmanship from being on stage when I wasn't a good bodybuilder, but practicing when I was dancing, and I was dancing with guys who were a lot better than me. And like you, I paid a person to teach me dance,
Look good.
Yeah, it's pretty entertaining. Even I'll admit that. I don't handle compliments well, and I don't give myself many, but I'll admit it's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of that one. Yeah, this was just a little bit of the old. It's very hard. What do you do for your back? Double biceps are a real lat spread, so I decided to just change it up with a few really unique sort of poses. And it was all about, I knew my condition was great, so I'm going to show you all great condition just by moving the muscles around a lot. I mean, I looked like stone on that day. It was crazy. It was disturbing. And boom, big explosion. And that was cool. I did that routine a week later at the New Zealand Pro Show, and I came out, and I had to come out. This is 2008, and I had to come out after Dexter Jackson, the year he wins the Mr. Olympia, and I came out with that. And as it started doing the haka part, the crowd, and what, 2,000 or 3,000 people, just raised the roof like you wouldn't believe. And it was like, my mindset was, I'm a middle-aged white guy from the North Shore, and I'm going to do a bit of haka here. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it big. I'm going to either fly or I'm going to go down in flames, but I'm not going to do it halfway. And I remember going off stage, and Willie Walker, who's very proud of his Maori heritage, Constable Willie, and well, probably Sergeant Willie, but man, he was just blown away to see a bit of his heritage, a bit of his culture on the stage. And you know, so, and of course we did all the Star Wars stuff and using Super Groove and whatnot as well.
Right, so I am just going to pull up now. So part of the reason I got you on here is A, because posing is really important, and it's an underrated and undervalued aspect of our sport.
Massive.
Second thing is because I kind of feel like, you know, in New Zealand, you're kind of one of the, you know, go-to guys, one of the experts. And I myself went to you last year and kind of said, look, Mike, can you give me a hand? Can you give me a few tips? Help me out. And so you got me to send you a video, and it was a shit video with bad lighting and all the rest of it. And the good thing is, you said, oh, at least you're in shape, which was quite nice. I knew I was sort of there or thereabouts. But then I was thinking, you know, you might give me a couple of tips. Then my posing probably wasn't too bad. I'm just going to show now what you sent back to me.
Yeah.
Because this is what
a little OCC of our ODD or whatever.
This is what Mike sent me, the posing notes. So as I kind of went through the pages of sort of adjustments he said I should make, so my posing is pretty good then. No, there's lots to work on there. So
well, it wasn't that it was bad, but you know, if you're hitting one pose, there's 7 or 8 things you're trying to do at once.
Yeah. With
a smile on your face. I've walked off stage after posing, both in like the New Zealand show just recently at Nationals. I'm literally nearly fainting from the effort I put in. I walked off stage after the last show, and there were some of the bikini girls there, and I said, this is why we go on when we need to go on. I said, because we nearly die out there, and you literally felt like you were dying. It's not just walking back or forward, or you know, doing like the board shorts boys and standing with a hand on your hip. You're flexing everything to the absolute nth degree. It's like trying to do a sprint, but for, you know, a marathon distance.
And here, even when you win, you lose. Even when you win, you lose. Rear double bicep done right. Not a lot of muscle, but you're doing it right with what you've got. Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's great. So,
God, I look like an asshole.
Call it the way you see it. Call it the way you see it.
Yeah, I do. I won't insult you, but I'll be honest.
Yeah. So you gave me all that feedback. You gave me a really detailed breakdown. It was really good. I sort of tried to put a lot of that stuff into practice. Subsequent to that, and some people will be aware that you've decided you're going to make this a bit of a side hustle, and so you've set up Pose Like a King, which is your new posing coaching business. Which, you know, I'm putting it out there. I'm going to employ Mike this year to help me with my posing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I need accountability. So if I go out and pose like shit, it'll reflect badly on Mike. So I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm going to put the work in to make sure that I pose well. Also that I feel that I can really add something to my posing and classic, and kind of help me present better than I have in the past. So we thought we'd kind of, I'd show you that there's the sort of detailed breakdown that Mike gave me last year, which is really helpful and valuable. And then we thought we'd kind of pull up a couple of pictures of Darren. Now, we were planning on having Darren here, so now we're going to shred his posing without him here. But I'm going to pull up a few pictures, both, you know, of sort of the feedback that Mike could give you, so that he can kind of, I guess, demonstrate, you know, the types of feedback he might give you and the types of help that you might be able to get. So I'll just pull those pictures of Darren up if I can find them. Where are we?
And before we get too far, Darren is off season at the moment, so you know, we won't rip into his condition or anything like that.
Please preface it with the fact that I'm 113 kilos and off season.
He's carrying a lot of muscle. He's a big unit, that's for sure.
Well, you know, he was in Class C last year, in Class D, and he got beaten by Chrissy, classic Chrissy. So they're not coming up.
Chrissy's going to come over and do some work with me too. I've had about sort of half a dozen people reach out and say, yeah, I'm keen.
I have to close down a few. I'm going to have to close down a few windows so I can get the right windows I want.
The reason I did it too is because, you know, there's so many bikini coaches out there, and I realize there's nobody doing this for the guys, and I don't want to be a judge, and I get asked about diets all the time. I don't want to do that. You know, there's people who are better qualified. I just refer everyone to Mike Debenham for that. and there's PTs. Well, I don't want to do that. So, but I want to do something. And I thought, well, this is something I actually enjoy. I'm good at. And it's only going to be just simply for bodybuilding and classic physique guys. If you're board shorts or female, sorry, there's other people for that. So yeah.
Your Darren weighs about the same as me, but he's about 5 centimeters shorter. So I'm going to have it. I think I might be in slightly better condition than him right now, but I'm still going to be up against it this year, going up against him. So here is, so Darren sent his latest check-in photos. As I say, off season, almost peak off season. He's about to start cutting soon. 113 kilos at 181 centimeters. So his weight cap for classic, I think he said, was 98 kilos.
So he's 181 centimeters.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, well, that's a big unit.
So yeah, he's got a bit to come down, but I'm sure, knowing him, he comes in really good condition, so he'll be sweet. So this is what
classic. You've got to work so hard. Like the posing work for classic is sensationally hard and so different to bodybuilding. And unfortunately, if someone wants to work with me, I've done open pro bodybuilding. I'm an open Mr. New Zealand winner, and I've done open pro classic. So I've learned fastidiously both sides of it. I've been on stage with Kai Green and Dexter and Melvin Anthony and the likes. So yeah.
So Mike took these, and I hope I can zoom this up a little bit.
It's actually a good pose for Darren, and what we don't see is the way he leads into it with his left hand forward and rotating around, very similar to mine. I really like the story that tells. I didn't do a lot with it here. There isn't actually a huge amount to work with him on this one because he's very good at it. The real subtle things to note is just particularly the circle. He's got to just not only keep the waist in, which creates, we talk about the X frame front on, but side on there's an X frame. It's just, so he's got to bring that right shoulder a little bit further around. He's got to bring that right elbow just out a little bit, and the right hand in a little bit. So you're creating almost a little X frame side on, and by sucking that waist in, he'll accentuate that. But not only when it's sucked in, but when he's side on, you've got to flex those obliques, and you've got to sit there and hold them. Because if you're the guy flexing your obliques and the other guys aren't, you're showing an entirely new set of muscles. And I'll tell people, it's like you're telling a story up there. You're filling a gap, So often we see guys side on and there's just nothing there. And then if you're the one with something there, it stands out. Particularly, it's right in the middle. It's not like flexing a forearm. It's right in the middle of everything. It's in your eyes.
Yeah.
And then his left arm, just the shoulder needs to come down a little bit. Once that's down, that's probably going to just thicken his front pec up just a little bit as well. And he would do that simply by rotating ever so slightly forward. There's a couple of other things. He could corkscrew his thigh a little bit just to switch that on, but you wouldn't notice that until he's leaner, whether he may well be doing that already. I can tell just from the angle, his foot position is really, really good. When you're doing posing, you've got to think from the ground up. You've got to start right calves, quads, hams, glutes, waist, up to your shoulders and arms. And then once you hit that, you start again, because by that stage, your brain is a computer and it's trying to do this, 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 and this. And, by the time you get to the top, it might have switched off the bottom. So how often have we thought we're flexing our legs and someone yells out, flex your legs, and you're like, I am, but you look down and they're soft. So.
And is that pulling the rib cage towards the hip to flex those obliques a little? That brings
yeah. It's just an activation without an actual movement, because if you actually move, it'll look funny. So you've got to flex it like you're going to move, but not actually move. It's also being conscious of two things: where the light is coming from and where the judges are sitting. So you've got to realize the judges are down here and they're looking up, and so you've got to play to that. But the light is also up high and coming down, so you've got to enable that light to get in. We were fortunate in Wellington; they had ground lighting as well, and it looks so much better when there's lighting from below and above. It cooks you. It's really hot up there, but I wasn't worried about the heat. I trained for that.
Righto, let's zoom that one in. So this is the original.
Yeah. I'm
hitting his front double there, and will it allow me to go on to the next one? It won't. Do I have to redo that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of work to do on the front and rear double Ys for Darren. One of the things I did with him ever so lightly on these ones, and I also did it with Steve Orton, is I like to highlight when structurally something isn't in the right place. So if you draw a line, for example, and if I seem critical or picky, you guys want to see how much I pick on myself. It's 1,000 times, and I'm not exaggerating. It's just so much more intense, the level of attention and detail and critique I give myself. But his elbows were ever so slightly down, lower than his shoulders, and it looks funny. The only one who's ever had success doing that was Branch Warren, and it still looked funny. He needs to have those elbows just ever so slightly up at that angle, not down at this angle. So he can achieve that by literally just bringing your shoulders down. He looks almost like hunching a little bit. Yeah, so bringing those shoulders down and out. It may flare his lats a little bit better. Not that he's got any problem. He's got great lats, but just bringing those elbows up a little bit. The leg, it looks like he's hitting your calf pose. The only one who's had success doing that was Jay Cutler. And let's face it, Jay had slightly better legs than Darren. But he needs to just bring that leg out a little bit, slightly rotate it out, and not be flexing the calf back behind him. So looks to have all the weight on this left leg, which is fine, but it kind of makes his right leg, which is obviously on our left, look a little bit small. So it's just really subtle positions. I've always had a lot of trouble with that one, in that if I bend my leg a bit too much, all the muscle just comes up off the knee and up to the top. So I've got to almost have as straight a leg as possible without having a locked straight leg, because then it looks a bit too funny as well. It's just so difficult to hit,
And
it's hard to find poses.
Depressing those scapulas and bringing it down might shorten the distance a little bit between of the waist. I mean, tall guys like us generally, unless you got really low lats, and I have a long distance between the bottom of the lats and the flare of the quad. So shortening that distance.
He's hitting it pretty good. It's just that scapular control. A lot of people don't realize it's scapular control. I saw a photo posted by a pro overseas who talked. It was a back shot of one of his clients and trying to blame his client's excessive trap development on his technique and bent over rows. And he got a bit shitty when I called him out and said, actually, your client's just not posing properly. And he looks like so often I see people back on and they think a rear lat spread is a rear trap hunch instead, and they hit a lat spread and they do this. It's like sometimes and I've said this to Nate, what feels right doesn't look right, and so you've got to look and analyze the pictures, and then you've got to hit what looks right. And it might feel weird as crap, but it's the right thing. And
whoops, no, we're not front double bicep, we're rear double bicep now. So here's the original, and I shall just bring up your suggestions.
Fairly similar suggestions too in that one. Again, you can see that the elbows are too low. I'm assuming he doesn't leave his arms that far out, because they're quite wide out. The hands are quite wide out. I assume that they would, he's done a screen grab, but again, that scapula, he's pinching it back and down and in. He's got to go down and out. He's got to lift those elbows up a little bit. I'm assuming because there's a little bit more detail that is right on his right glute, that he's flexing his right hamstring and calf, and there's just a little bit of work to do there. You've got to learn to be able to switch that hamstring on. Again, it's another one. The number of shows are one where people say, oh, it's pretty even from the front. Then you turn back on and it was just boom, done, because I had detail from the waist down. And obviously that's diet and condition, but it's also the ability to flex it and switch it and turn it on. And, Mila Sashiev writes some really good stuff about just flexing the hamstrings while you're standing in the rear relaxed. You'll never spot a picture of me, Milos, or Matteo with soft hamstrings and the rear relaxed. It's not just the fact we've dieted it off, we're switching them on and holding them there. So I think Darren's right leg needs to come back a little bit more calf flexion, but being conscious of not bringing it back too far to a straight leg. I've seen another New Zealand pro, a great poser, with a far too straight back leg, and when you go straight, the calf doesn't really flex very well, and you're losing an opportunity to show something. So but yeah, look at those lines, and you can do this with any of your own pictures. The lines I drew on his arms, his arms are going down. If you follow me on Instagram on Pose Like a King, you'll scroll back to one of my earlier pictures, you'll see some of the details. Steve Orton used to get me to help him out with his posing, prepping for shows. And man, there's lines all over his thing because, you know, one side would be less symmetrical than the other. So, you know, I've had someone who helped in the past, a top international champion who used to hold their front relax and their right shoulder was much higher. And I got them to drop it down. They said it feels like they were tipping this way, but they were actually level. Whereas when they thought they were level, they were like that. So
yeah, so that's another little trick that I've used in the past is, you know, you got to get away from the mirror eventually. So you usually start your posing in the mirror, you know, or the big windows or whatever. So you look in the mirror, get it even, get it right, close your eyes, go out of the pose, go back into it, open your eyes. Is it still even? And usually it feels crooked when it's even because you're not quite right. So you've got to make it feel right because sooner or later there's going to be no mirror there. You've just got to feel it right.
Wouldn't it be awesome if there were mirrors on the stage? Some of the pro shows I've done, my first one, the Australian pro show, we turned back on and there's a big screen behind us. And so we're all hitting our red over biceps and looking up at and looking at video of ourselves. That video right in the middle there of me walking out in LA, the funniest thing is right at the end of it, I got distracted because to the left of me, there's a big screen and I looked across and I was like, oh, and there was me. You know? So, but we get a 1 minute opening routine. And so this is, you know, going in there, showing my thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, nice.
Scroll down.
Yeah, some of the old
go down and we'll see. There's Steve. So look at the work I did on Steve's picture down there. You know, really highlighting, you know, on that left shot, you can see that the left arm is much higher than the right arm because of the relation of those lines, you know, when you're measuring off. So the arm on the left, which is his right, if we look at it, and I've drawn an elbow from a line from the middle of the elbow to the to right where his pec deltoid is, done the same on the other side, and it's quite a different angle you can see. So it's getting slowly better as he gets hairier and more ripped, and just trying to create these lines. So there's a line going from his belly button to, I guess, the outer point of his lat, you know, and just trying to create more width. So there's a huge amount of assessment on that. Yeah.
And that's a kind of really, well, not obvious thing, but that's you know, having the symmetry left to right, having angles that are the same. So when you're going into a classic pose, you know, Barry DeMay was great for that. You know, we'd do a sort of a half lat spread with his arm extended. You know, the angle of the arm would match the angle of the quad. So there's just some parallel symmetrical lines there that would kind of make the pose look a bit more aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't the biggest guy, but damn, I mean, you know,
I was sort of hoping I might look like him since I'm the same height and weight, but you're not quite.
We're all hoping we could do that. But,
and look, mate, I'd take the way he looks now, actually, rather as much as he still looks amazing.
Him and Leela Brada both just, they are retirement goals, those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, in their 60s and just look amazing.
So, yeah, if you want to get hold of Mike, you could jump on Instagram, Pose Like a King, flick him a message there. And
I'm not just working with the elite guys, although the elite guys have reached out to me. I mean, you know, that's going to be a lot easier with them, I guess, because they're, you know, people such as yourself have done shows, committed, won, so you know what you're listening to. But, you know, I've had a guy once who, he was on a PT client who came to me, he was a bit upset. And I said, what's the matter? And he's oh, I don't look very good in this photo. I don't think you've done a really good job with me and whatnot. And, you know, putting on muscle. And, oh, okay, showed me a side chest. Side chest is perhaps the hardest pose to hit, you know. And so I said, well, it's a tough pose. Let me go and do something with you. Come with me. Went away. I'm not exaggerating. If it would have been 4 minutes of work with him, and he looked like he'd put on about 10 kilos by the time I said, now look at this photo. And he was astounded. Because it's like how you present it is everything.
Well, we talk about, you know, young, you know, beginners or people doing their first show, you know, get yourself a coach, you know, save yourself some time, save yourself the hassle, don't make the mistakes that rookies make. Well, you know, got to do the same with posing, a little bit of investment and both your time and money can kind of, you know, kickstart you along the right pathway.
I learned more in this last prep for my posing and the one before that for my posing than I did in the previous 30-something years. Why wait till you're 30-odd years to get it right? Just come and see me, and I'll give you the tips straight away. I mean, I was down in Napier the other week doing a sampling, and a guy came in and had a chat, and it was just some really simple little things that you can do that switch it on, and it'll make you again look 5 kilos better, or accentuate your shape so that you look just more aesthetic. And it's really simple stuff. You know, why wait and figure it out? I can tell you.
So you work with open bodybuilders, you work with classic. Would you stretch to figure, or?
No, I wouldn't. It's just simply, you know, when you say open bodybuilders, just bodybuilding. So I work with novice bodybuilders, junior bodybuilders and everything. Yeah. But figure is, you know, I guess I could do a figure for just the standard symmetry round, but I feel like in the past I've worked with women, and I think women just simply communicate better with other women. And I think there's probably better people than me out there to work with figure and the like. So, you know, I had a client who was working with 10, 11 years ago, doing great. And I took her to see Joe Stewart, and it was just like, wow, the way Joe communicated to woman to woman, just, she picked up on the nuances. And, you know, that lady went on and won her first show, won the overall. So, and a good part of it was her presentation, which I take no credit for, other than driving the car to see Joe.
Yep. All right. We might wrap it there, Mike, but is there anything else you want to add or say? I mean, we're pushing the pose like a king there a little bit, but mainly the get your posing right, put the time inside of things.
You know what, even if you don't use me, practice your posing. As we said, practice your posing endurance. Just one example, I would go into my garage with the dryer on and the doors closed. I wasn't even allowed to take water in there. I had to suffer, and it'd be very, very hot prepping. You know, the show was in summertime, and I set up on my phone a program that basically did a round timer. And so I would hold each pose for, I think it was 25 seconds, and then have 10 seconds break between each pose. And I would do that 5 rounds of the compulsories. And that was after doing 5 rounds of the relaxed poses. So it was a 20-minute posing routine in a really hot garage with no water. And that's why I could stand at the back for half an hour, or stand at the front and get called out 5 times in a row and not flinch.
Back to that into your neat.
The number of people that came up to me afterwards and said, you looked like the professional up there. And that wasn't because I was a better physique. It was because I'd put in so much work in my posing. And
I was impressed. Yeah,
it felt really good to have people acknowledge that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, guys. We'll try and get some more content out shortly. But until then, stay safe.
Take it easy, guys.